The mahogany dining table groaned under the weight of Mom's elaborate Thanksgiving spread, heritage turkey, truffle stuffing, and wines that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I sat at the far end, quietly cutting my food while my family discussed their latest luxury acquisitions, all funded by what they believed was their inherited wealth but was actually my personal fortune. "Ashley, darling, you really should contribute more to the household expenses," Mom said, dabbing her lips with a silk napkin. "Your brother's yacht maintenance alone costs $15,000 monthly, and we can't expect him to sacrifice his lifestyle just because you're struggling financially." I looked up from my plate, keeping my expression neutral. At 29, I'd perfected the art of appearing unremarkable while my family spent millions of my dollars on toys and status symbols. What Mom didn't realize was that Kevin's yacht maintenance came directly from my investment accounts, along with every other expense that supported their lavish lifestyle. My brother Kevin laughed, swirling his $300 wine. "Poor sister must help the family, right? That's what family money is for." He gestured toward the harbor window where his latest acquisition, a 60-foot yacht named Golden Legacy, bobbed among other vessels owned by genuinely wealthy people. The irony was breathtaking. Kevin's yacht, purchased with my money, bore a name that perfectly captured their delusion about inherited wealth. They'd somehow convinced themselves that our middle-class family had suddenly come into massive generational money, when the reality was that my cryptocurrency investments and tech startup sales had generated over $50 million in the past 5 years. "Kevin's absolutely right," Dad agreed, refilling his crystal glass. "Your grandmother's estate was meant to benefit the entire family, not just one person hoarding resources. Poor Ashley seems to forget that family wealth comes with family obligations." The fictional grandmother's estate was their explanation for sudden riches, a comfortable lie that allowed them to spend my money without acknowledging its actual source. They'd created an elaborate mythology around inherited wealth to avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth that their despised poor sister was actually the family's only source of income. "Speaking of obligations," Mom continued, "we need $42,000 for the November house payment. The property taxes are due next week and the staff's salaries can't wait." She spoke about $42,000 like it was pocket change, which it essentially was when someone else was paying. What she didn't mention was that their house payment was actually the mortgage on a $7 million estate they couldn't afford on their non-existent legitimate income. Uncle Richard, Mom's brother, raised his glass in a toast to family legacy and responsible wealth management. "It's wonderful to see Ashley finally contributing appropriately to maintaining our family's standard of living." The applause was polite but pointed. They'd spent months training me to accept my role as the family's reluctant financier, someone who needed constant social pressure to fulfill my obligations to relatives who'd supposedly inherited equal shares of mythical wealth. "Ashley works so hard at her little computer job," Kevin said with mock sympathy. "At least she can contribute something meaningful to the family, even if her career isn't as impressive as mine." Kevin's career consisted primarily of managing investments that didn't exist and attending social events funded by my actual business success. His most recent achievement was being featured in a yacht club magazine as an example of young wealth done right. An article that would be particularly amusing when the truth about his finances became public knowledge. "What's your contribution this month, Ashley?" Mom asked with the tone she'd used to request a small favor. "We've been very patient about the delayed transfers, but the December yacht insurance is due and Kevin's planning that charity regatta." The charity regatta would cost approximately $200,000 and benefit exactly no one except Kevin's social standing. But questioning such expenses would only earn me another lecture about family responsibility and the importance of maintaining their community reputation. "I'll handle the transfer tomorrow," I said quietly, cutting another piece of turkey. "You're such a good sister," Kevin said, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "Even if you're not as successful as the rest of us, at least you're generous with what little you have." Tomorrow's bank meeting would provide an excellent opportunity to clarify exactly who had what in our family's financial arrangement. The forensic accountants had been documenting their spending patterns for months, and their report would make fascinating reading for everyone involved. The rest of Thanksgiving passed in familiar patterns. Kevin regaled everyone with stories of yacht club politics and upcoming regattas, while Mom detailed her plans for redecorating their estate with furnishings that cost more than most people's houses. Dad discussed his investment portfolio and business ventures with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned where his money actually originated. Ashley, you should really consider moving back into the family estate, Mom suggested over dessert. You're wasting money on that little apartment when we have plenty of space here. Plus, it would make the monthly transfers more convenient. The suggestion was presented as maternal concern, but I recognized the underlying calculation. Having me on site would ensure their personal ATM was always accessible, and eliminating my rent payments would free up more money for their luxuries. I appreciate the offer, but I value my independence. Independence is overrated when family needs support, Kevin added. Besides, grandmothers will specifically mention keeping the family together. We should honor her wishes about shared prosperity. The non-existent grandmother's will was constantly evolving to justify their latest financial demands. According to their mythology, she'd been a shrewd investor who'd left detailed instructions about family wealth distribution. Instructions that always seemed to require me funding their lifestyle choices. Over the following weeks, their spending reached new heights. Kevin ordered a second yacht for winter sailing, Mom purchased a collection of rare art pieces, and Dad invested in a private jet share that would cost more annually than most people earned in a lifetime. Each purchase came with elaborate justifications about family legacy, investment wisdom, and maintaining social standing. They'd convinced themselves they were responsible stewards of inherited wealth rather than adults spending someone else's money on toys. The art collection is really an investment, Mom explained during one of our weekly dinners. These pieces will appreciate significantly, and it's important for the family to have culturally significant assets. The culturally significant assets included a minor Picasso sketch that cost $800,000 and would hang in her bedroom where exactly 3 people would ever see it. But questioning the purchase would only trigger lectures about my failure to appreciate fine art and family heritage. Kevin's yacht expansion makes perfect sense too, Dad added. The charter business has tremendous potential, and having multiple vessels increases our market opportunities. Kevin's charter business existed only in their imagination, but planning meetings about non-existent customers filled several hours weekly and provided excellent justification for yacht-related expenses. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. They lived in a world where I was simultaneously too poor to merit respect and wealthy enough to fund their fantasies without limits. In their minds, I was the family's administrative assistant, useful for handling financial details but not important enough to involve in spending decisions. Ashley handles all the boring money stuff, became Kevin's standard explanation when friends asked about funding sources. She's good with numbers and paperwork, so we let her manage the inheritance details while we focus on actually enjoying life. The boring money stuff included generating every dollar they spent, but acknowledging that reality would shatter their comfortable fiction about inherited wealth and family hierarchy. What made their behavior particularly galling was how they'd rewritten our family history. When I'd started sharing my business profits 5 years ago, it was supposed to be temporary support during Dad's career transition. But temporary had become permanent and gratitude had become entitlement. They'd convinced themselves they were successful people managing inherited wealth, while I was merely the useful sibling who handled mundane tasks like paying bills and managing investments. The truth, that every luxury they enjoyed came from my business success, was too threatening to their self-image to acknowledge. Tomorrow's meeting with the bank president would provide an excellent opportunity to clarify these financial relationships once and for all. The executive conference room at First National Bank commanded respect with its panoramic city views and handcrafted furnishings. As the principal account holder responsible for over $50 million in assets, I warranted the personal attention of President Margaret Chin and her senior staff. What my family didn't know was that I'd requested this meeting specifically to address their spending patterns, which had reached levels that triggered federal reporting requirements and internal fraud alerts. When someone with no legitimate income spends millions annually, banks notice. Ms. Ashley Morrison, President Chin began, spreading documents across the polished conference table, we've completed the forensic accounting review you requested regarding your family's financial activities. I'd invited my family to attend this routine portfolio review, describing it as an opportunity to optimize their investment strategies and discuss inheritance planning. They'd arrived expecting to learn about trust fund distributions and tax planning, not to confront mathematical impossibilities in their spending patterns. Mom sat confidently in her designer suit, prepared to discuss her art investments and estate planning. Dad adjusted his Rolex, ready to explain his business ventures and portfolio performance. Kevin checked his phone, expecting a brief meeting before his yacht club appointment. Before we begin, President Chin continued, I should clarify that this review was commissioned by Ms. Morrison to analyze the financial relationships and spending patterns within your family unit. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as they processed this information. Our forensic analysis reveals some fascinating patterns, President Chin said, activating the presentation screen. Over the past 5 years, this family has maintained a combined lifestyle costing approximately $2.8 million annually, luxury real estate, multiple vehicles, yacht purchases, art collections, travel, and miscellaneous expenses. Charts and graphs appeared on screen, documenting every aspect of their consumption with banking-level precision. Mr. Kevin Morrison has no documented employment or business income. Mr. David Morrison's consulting firm shows revenue of approximately $35,000 annually. Mrs. Catherine Morrison has no recorded income source. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Their spending exceeded their income by roughly $2.7 million annually. This creates an obvious mathematical problem. How does a family with essentially no legitimate income maintain expenses approaching $3 million annually? Dad cleared his throat nervously. Well, there's the inheritance from Catherine's mother, and my investment returns have been quite substantial. President Chen's smile was professionally devastating. Our investigation found no evidence of any inheritance, investment returns, or business income sufficient to support these expenditures. However, we did discover the actual funding source. New documents appeared on screen, detailed transaction records, account transfers, business income statements. 5 years of financial data traced with forensic precision. Every expense supporting your family's lifestyle. Every mortgage payment, yacht purchase, art acquisition, and luxury expenditure originates from accounts controlled by Ms. Ashley Morrison. Her cryptocurrency investments and technology company sales have generated over $53 million since 2019. The silence was absolute. 5 years of assumptions crumbling as they confronted documentation that couldn't be dismissed. Ms. Morrison has personally funded your entire lifestyle while you've treated her as the family's unsuccessful member. The monthly transfers you've received average $230,000, money you've apparently convinced yourselves came from non-existent inheritance. President Chin turned to address my family directly. The sister you've called Poor Ashley has been your sole source of income for 5 years. Without her financial support, you would be homeless within 60 days. Kevin's face had gone pale. That's impossible. Ashley works some computer job. The money comes from grandmother's estate. There is no grandmother's estate. There are no investment returns. There are no business profits. Every dollar you've spent came from Ms. Morrison's technology ventures while you dismissed her achievements as insignificant. The truth was finally exposed. No more pretending to be the family's financial burden while funding their delusions of inherited wealth. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Within minutes of President Chen's presentation, my family's entire understanding of their situation had collapsed. The sister they dismissed as Poor Ashley was revealed as their sole financial lifeline, while their supposed wealth was exposed as complete fiction. I terminated all family accounts that evening. Credit cards were canceled, automatic transfers stopped, and access to my funds immediately revoked. 5 years of unlimited spending ended with a few electronic transactions. The consequences were swift and merciless. Kevin's yacht was repossessed within a week when the payments stopped. Mom's art collection went to auction to cover outstanding debts. Dad's private jet share was canceled for non-payment. The $7 million estate they couldn't actually afford went into foreclosure when the mortgage company realized the payments had been coming from accounts they no longer controlled. Within 30 days, my family went from millionaire lifestyle to genuine homelessness. Kevin tried calling repeatedly, his voice progressing from confusion to anger to desperate pleading as reality set in. Ashley, this is insane. You can't just cut off the family inheritance. Grandmothers will specifically. There is no grandmother, Kevin. There is no inheritance. There never was. Every dollar you've spent for 5 years came from my business success while you called me the family failure. The silence stretched as he processed 5 years of lies dissolving into mathematical impossibility. Mom's reaction was more complex. Tearful apologies about misunderstanding my contributions, followed by desperate attempts to negotiate partial funding for basic necessities, like the mortgage on a mansion she'd never owned. Dad simply couldn't accept the new reality. Even as he packed belongings from a foreclosed estate, he insisted there must be accounting errors, missing trust documents, or legal challenges that would restore their fictional wealth. They attempted various reconciliation strategies: family therapy suggestions, holiday guilt trips, medical emergencies that required financial assistance. But I'd learned the most important lesson about family dynamics. People who treat your generosity as their entitlement don't deserve either. Within 6 months, the transformation was complete. Kevin found work at a yacht club, not as a member but as maintenance staff earning minimum wage. Mom discovered that retail employment was considerably less glamorous than art collecting. Dad learned that actual consulting work paid far less than imaginary investment returns. Their former social circle, built entirely on perceived wealth, evaporated when they could no longer afford club memberships and charity donations. The community standing they'd prioritized over family relationships disappeared along with their ability to fund it. My cryptocurrency portfolio continued generating substantial returns. The technology patents I'd developed provided ongoing royalty income. The business success they'd dismissed as unimportant sustained the lifestyle they could never actually afford. The bank president's report sits framed in my home office now, a reminder that financial truth matters more than family mythology. Success isn't determined by spending patterns but by actual income generation. And sometimes the most important audit reveals not accounting fraud, but emotional deception that's lasted far too long. Family obligations are real, but they flow both ways. When relatives treat your success as their inheritance while dismissing your achievements, they've forfeited any claim to ongoing support. Truth, unlike inherited wealth, actually exists, and it's the only asset that can't be spent.